This is Next Radio 2017 with Broadcast Bionics.
So, what's the Annie Mac story? So, if you look up the good old-fashioned journalistic device of Wikipedia, it talks about being born in Dublin and then going to uni at Queen's. What happened then to get you to the UK?
I decided, I made a very kind of rudimentary decision in my final year in Queen's that I wanted to do radio based on the fact that you get to talk a lot and you get to play music. Literally that simple. Because I was really into DJing at the time, I just bought my first set of decks and was practicing mixing very badly in my rented accommodation and going clubbing and just kind of felt quite inspired musically and wanted to try and find a way to kind of further my education. But
so have you done student radio or
nothing? There was no radio station at Queen's, which is a shame. I would have really liked to do it. But so I chose a course in Farnborough College of Technology because it seemed to be very practical. And it had its studio, you could go in and learn how to make a news bulletin and make an ad and all that. So I went over there and got stuck into the kind of learning radio and loved it, absolutely loved it, and started sending emails to people, Emma B, Eddie Temple Morris at XFM, so started kind of reaching out to people. And my brother was in a band living in London at the time, and I went to go and live with them afterwards. And he was signed to V2, which is Richard Branson's old record label, and I managed to get work experience in his label through him, and was there for 2 weeks, and a job came up to work in a radio plugging company, which I then went to work in and kind of learnt a lot there, actually, in terms of who did what show, who produced what show played what.
So when you were in Farnborough and you wanted to do radio, having been exposed to that, did you think, actually, this is what I want to do, or I didn't realise that I'm more like this person. I want to go and do this.
Well, it was more just it was Marianne Hobbs who we just saw that made me think I could be a radio DJ, having not been exposed to Radio 1 in the south of Ireland, obviously, because we don't get the BBC radio there. It was when I went to Belfast that I discovered Radio 1 and listened to it religiously. And Marianne Hobbs' show was like nothing I'd ever heard before because it was completely eclectic, and it had a really loose kind of overall concept, I guess. It was vaguely electronic, but that was the only constraints on the music that she played. And I just remember loving it and listening to it every night and recording it on my mini disc player.
Have you still got a stack of mini discs at home?
Yes, I do.
You
in
can
a
now
shoebox.
no longer play on
I'm
anything.
this is my history, all my demos and stuff. But so her listening to her was a big kind of epiphany moment for me. Also, Emma B and Sarah Cox used to do a show on Sunday nights on Radio 1, which was them just talking a lot. And I remember thinking that it sounded really fun. So that was another thing that I really liked, which is why I emailed Emma B, actually. It was listening to women and listening to women play good music and realising, maybe I could do that.
So you're doing work experience in plugging company, you're starting to work at a plugging company. Was that sort of a taking the cloth off the secrecy of how it all works, how it all is hooked up?
I was putting things in envelopes, and then I was posting those envelopes in post boxes in the BBC stations. I was learning about how a production team worked, what made up of a normal production team for a specialist music show at Radio 1 or something. I learned a lot of names. I got familiar with a lot of names. And then when I was there in that time, I started working for SBN, Student Broadcast Network. And I had
for people who don't know, SBN used to provide a kind of sustaining service overnight to student radio stations.
Yeah, so I produced the hip-hop show. I presented the Saturday and Sunday morning, the weekend breakfast show. And then I had my own In Session with Annie McManus, not the most catchy name of all time, where I would go and record bands playing live. Again, I had no idea how to record a band. I just winged it, and we put them out on our show. And that happened in Camden, in Primrose Hill. So in my lunchtimes at this plugging place, I would be going over there and interviewing bands upstairs at the Barfly and just being really busy. So my boss at the time, who is an incredible woman, she kind of saw what I wanted to do, and she had a very close relationship with a guy called Rhys Hughes at Radio 1, and she spoke to him And eventually he agreed to see me. And I'd seen kind of 3 or 4 different execs at that point.
Okay. So at this point, to present or to work
well, this is the
or...
problem, because I wanted to produce and ultimately I wanted to present, but I would have been very...
Was production just an excuse to then go on air?
I think I would have been really happy to produce, but I wanted to push to present. Okay. It's a tough problem when you're going to see someone like that, because they're like, well, do you really want to work here, or do you just want to do your own show?
Because that is the big challenge, isn't it? I mean, I think lots of new DJs say, should I work there first? Because the general rule seems to be, no, concentrate on being a presenter. But that doesn't necessarily work for you. So you met Reese.
I met Reese. I'd met a few people before then and hadn't really got the shoe in. And then Reese eventually called me a few weeks later when someone was ill and I stepped in. I did do a whole year working for Net FM as well. I've forgotten that. That was somewhere in London. And internet radio, when internet radio was the thing, like the new thing. And we used to build, actually, the foresight was on point. We used to build pages, like very, again, basic web pages to go with every song that we played. Okay. We'd have to write 3 facts and put up a photo of every artist, and that would flash up on the page as you played a song. But it was aimed at kind of middle-aged guys, and we made shows about cars and played a lot of Crowded House. It's they generalised badly in terms of the music that they played.
So bits of Depping on production, so bits of freelance production.
Yeah, I produced my own show and presented that, and I did a lot of production as well. I produced stuff for SBN. So with Radio 1, I just wanted to get in. I just wanted to get in that door, and I got in, luckily, to Steve Lamac's show. And he was doing across the week, Monday to Thursday, and they had 2 producers and 2 assistant producers, because on Monday nights they had a long show, 4-hour show. So I kind of, after a couple of weeks at Radio 1, a job came up and I managed to get a job of a BA, a broadcast assistant, on that show. And it was from then that I was too scared to tell anyone that I was a presenter. That was the problem.
Okay. So it was a secret?
It was still a secret. I was still doing my shows for SBN, and I was still doing the odd thing, but I was too scared to tell anyone in case they thought that I didn't want to be there otherwise. And it actually happened, we were doing a board meeting in the boardroom, and Mike Davies, the other BA, who went on to present the punk show, Googled my name on the keyboard of this big screen in front of us all, and my name came up in session with Danny Manners with this band, and they were like, what are these? Was
that on purpose to expose you?
No, it wasn't. I think he was just trying to take try and find something bad. But unfortunately, or fortunately, it was all the radio shows.
So that was it. So Secret's out.
Secret's out. Hannah Brown, my producer at the time, saw that, and I guess as a producer, you can do what you want with that news. But she was incredibly supportive and kind of acknowledged it with me, and then went on to kind of. There was a few spots. Nimone was ill at Glastonbury, so I had to step in and do the entertainment news, just little things like that. And there was a late night show called One World, which did global music. They needed a presenter, and they chose me to present, but not as Annie Mac or Annie McManus, just as a voice, like a nameless presenter.
Right.
And then Joe Harland, who you just saw, he was my editor at the time, so my exec, so he was kind of overseeing those shows. And he gave me one of the best bits of advice I've ever had, actually, which was make a pilot, but make a pilot of you presenting the show that you want to present. So make it easy for the people that are going to give you the job, so they know how you are going to sound in that place. And I did that. And
because that's quite brave, because if there isn't necessarily a slot for it, there's a bit of worry there that, God, do they even want this? Like me?
Luckily, I had a dream show at Radio 1 that I listened to religiously and loved, which was The Breeze Block, Marianne Hobbs' show. So I did a pilot for that. And then I got the call a while later saying that they wanted a dep. And I depped twice for that show. And then I got given a Thursday night radio show, a dance show. That happened just before John Peel's show. And at that point, did you think, that's it, I've done it? Or do you think this is the journey? I was happy. I was like, objective achieved? Yeah. I had a goal to be a Radio 1 DJ, and I was. And so we still in Radio 1 production at this point as well? Well, I was also kind of lost, because I worked full-time in production, and then I left when that happened, because I was now a Radio 1 DJ, and I couldn't really do both, so I left and was like lost, had no idea what to do, took up swimming, and was just like, ugh. So it took me a while to kind of fill that role and fill my time being a freelance DJ. And obviously I started a DJ career properly then and started traveling. And
so I think it's an interesting bit about that shift from production to presenting. What did you think of Radio 1 presenters when you merely was a BA or a producer? And has any of that view shifted as your role has shifted?
Well, I think having that experience, kind of 2 years working behind the scenes, is probably the best thing that ever happened to me as a presenter, is knowing how a radio show works, knowing how a radio team should work, knowing everyone's roles and how they should be played and how a radio team can work together well. It's made me appreciate what the people who work on my show have to do to get the show together and to get it over the line. And it's made me have a much better perspective of the show in general. But I do think it's a really hard transition to make. I mean, people have done it, right?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of successful presenters started out in production, and it still happens. Like there's a girl called Jam Supernova, a One Extra, who's so good, who started out being an AP just a couple of years ago. So, you know, it's happening a lot, but it's a hard one. It's a hard transition.
So you made that transition, so you've got a weekly show,
Yeah.
and now it's like, oh God, I'm DJ now. So you start doing more club DJing and growing that. Was that new as well, or has that always been bubbling under at the same time?
I mean, I've been DJing since I was kind of 19, 20 at house parties for my own enjoyment. But when I got the Radio 1 show, it was quite remarkable how when you have that kind of name behind you, and when you have a weekly product as such in terms of your mixes and people can hear you, people start calling. So I was really thrown into the deep end and had to learn really quickly how to DJ in front of people. My boyfriend at the time used to sit behind me and be like, smile, they're all looking at you. And I'd be like, I can't, I've got to mix. And I used to bring a piece of paper with exactly what I was going to play in what order in front of me, which kind of defeats the purpose of being a DJ to a live crowd. But yeah, I got a bit braver over time.
And that has become quite a big part of your life. I mean, Annie Mac Presents is a brand in itself that's a part of you. And what was that transition like? is that a business thing you wanted to achieve or something you wanted to do?
It was kind of, as you mentioned, it was having one show a week. It's 2-3 hours a week is not a lot of time. Yeah, it can take you a couple of days to get the music together, to get the show together, but I had time and I wanted to kind of just keep doing things and keep challenging myself and keep myself interested, I guess. So AMP was born of that, and it grew a lot and became a kind of a big thing, and it still is. We do festivals, we do compilations every year. We do a lot of stuff, and I really enjoy it. And I feel like it's really helped in terms of, I think Radio 1 like to see their DJs doing things out of Radio 1 as well. It's another very good piece of advice I got, which was, don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's good to have your own stuff going on beyond the BBC, and I'm really glad I do.
So that then turned into more evening shows. And then you took over the early evening show, what was Zane Lowe's show.
Yeah.
That was quite a big show for the network.
Yeah.
He went off to do something else at Beats. Did you want to take on that show? Was it that's where I want to be, or was I don't know? Were you worried about putting your own position into something which had such a connection?
For a long time when I started at Radio 1, I think I wanted to do the mid-morning show. It was that kind of Joe Wiley slot that I thought would be the perfect slot for me. And then I wanted to do when John passed, I thought maybe that show would have been a good show in terms of a late night eclectic show. And Philly Taggart and Alice Levine got that, and I remember being sad, being like, God, man, I would have loved that show. And then I got the Sunday show, which was something that I kind of asked Reese about, because me and Grimmy used to do a Sunday evening show. And when Grimmy got the breakfast show, I said to Reese, can you let me do my thing with this Sunday slot? And he really gave me a lot of freedom. And so I had the Friday night and the Sunday night, and I absolutely loved both those shows, because both of those had the rare thing and the kind of lucky thing on a daily radio station of being able to represent the exact mood that the audience are in at the time. So Friday show, obviously, you have this feeling of kind of joy. You finish work, it's the weekend, it's uplifting, it's happy. Sunday we called it the musical hot water bottle, which is possibly the worst name for a radio show ever. And none of the American artists knew what I was talking about.
All show names are dreadful and should be banned. Yeah.
But it did kind of explain it a little bit about what it was supposed to be for, this kind of warm around the edges music, kind of really chilled, really relaxed. And people loved that. It felt like a kind of a cult-esque show, and I loved doing it. So I was happy with my lot. And, Zane's show, I worked on that for I worked on that slot for, nearly 2 years. And I loved that. But I never thought for a second that it would be up for grabs. I thought Zane, he is a world-class presenter. I didn't think he'd ever leave, and I didn't think Radio 1 would ever let go of him. So when I got the call, I was absolutely shocked. But obviously, completely delighted, because all I'd ever wanted was a daily radio show. And getting to keep the Friday on top, which obviously I'd worked so hard to build up stuff around that, was a bonus. So I was... I shed a tear, and then I was terrified. And I remember going in on Zane's last show, and he had this hashtag on the last day when everybody was like, Bono from U2, send in a pint of Guinness. Chris Martin, hashtag thank you Zane. And I was just like, oh fuck, I'm fucked. Fuck, like he knows everybody. He's got these relationships, and it was terrifying. But the first thing I learnt after a couple of weeks was that everybody is new at some point.
Yes.
And if you do any job for 12 years, you're going to be, hopefully, adept. And you're going to have relationships that you build up. And I guess the fear, dissipated once I got into the rhythm of it. Yeah.
When did it stop, in your own mind, stop being Zane's show and became your show?
I'd say it probably took about 6 months. Yeah, I still called it Zane's show at the start for ages. I got corrected a lot. Yeah.
And there's also a shift when you kind of slightly come earlier in the schedule about music Radio 1 want to play, support for artists, and what you want to play. And obviously you had a bit more control of that in other time slots.
Complete, pretty much.
So what's that like about choosing records you like versus station priorities or bands we should be supporting?
Yeah, I think it's, I come from that kind of staunch Radio 1 at night perspective of like, we've got to do what we do, who cares about the system, etc. And I have developed a kind of new and healthy respect, I guess, for the music industry and for what it does. And also, for the kind of effort that Radio 1 makes. So I think it's a real team effort, and I'm lucky enough to have, the most incredible radio team. The best that I've ever had, I think, at the moment in terms of how it works. So they all play their roles, but ultimately if I don't want to play something, I won't. And I'm lucky for
how
that.
much new music comes in a week? Would you get sent?
You can't even quantify that. Now it's gone digital. Like it used to be like 2 mail sacks worth. I remember John slinging them over his shoulder like a, Santa Claus, putting them in the boot of his car and driving them back every week. You can't quantify it. It is endless. Endless.
And is it all digital now? Have those bags entirely disappeared?
You still get vinyl the odd time and CDs, albums sometimes. You wouldn't get a CD single.
No.
Never. But yeah, it's
quite a shift
USBs.
in a relatively small amount of time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so fast. It's changed, especially for dance music, because, I play everything on my show, and there is like an unending amount of electronic music because it's so easy to make. Anyone can make it on their computer and just send it. So there's no less so than the kind of the other stuff. It's just endless.
So we've been talking a lot today about digital or video or podcasts or streaming services, the sort of expansion of what we do in radio. What do you see as your show? Is your show what comes out of some speakers somewhere, or is it more than that? More
recently, I see my show as being something that is multi-formatted. And one of the biggest things that we've done on our show recently, and the most important in my opinion, is have a content producer. So someone who will sit in the studio and record what goes on video, clip it up, put it out there on Instagram, put it on Facebook. So kind of be able to put what we do online in short, snappy, very usable clips and very shareable clips. Because so many people don't even listen to my show, but they'll know what's happening because they follow me on Twitter or they follow Radio 1. And I feel like that is as crucial now as the actual show, to be able to have that snappy content put out there. You know, with videos where you have, you know, the words at the bottom where, you know, if you're sat somewhere noisy, you can still see what people are saying. So that's become crucial, really crucial. And yeah, so having a big presence online is really important, yeah.
And so family-wise, your partner, Todd Litty, music industry.
Yeah.
Two kids,
Yeah.
4 and 9
4 and 8 months.
So is it a very musical household? Are you expecting your kids to take on your DJ mantles?
No expectations at all. I would like it if they liked music as much as we do. Otherwise, they're not going to have much fun growing up. But no expectations. Just to be happy. He has no idea what I do yet. Really, he's come into radio a few times when I've gone in to see Grimmy in the mornings. But every time I try and turn the radio on, he turns it off. He's learned how to turn it on and off. He's learned how to put a CD on, and he just turns it off. So make of that what you will.
Well, on that bombshell, thank you very much, Annie Mac.
Thank you.